All right. Hello, hello. Welcome to our annual year in review. I'm Allie Armitage, and I'm here with my dear friend Christian Duell. And we are now on, goodness, the 10th, 9th,
This will be
which
our
one?
ninth reflection and our 10-year friend anniversary in February, I think.
10th friend anniversary, ninth annual reflection from across the world, having never actually met each other, but having shared just very profound lessons, learnings, stories, the journey of being a embodied human for the past 10 years. And um, yeah, a lot of accountability and support for one another. So
Mm.
we're continuing this tradition of reflecting on the year, asking each other questions, sharing what came up, and sharing that with others in case it's useful, helpful, valuable for folks to listen to. Anything you want to add to
Oh,
that?
well, this is also just a version of what we've done almost every fortnight for the last 10 years.
Yeah.
And it's been so valuable for us. So that's partly what we do every year is to record it in case it's valuable for other people as well at
Mhm.
this time of year.
Yeah, beautiful. So let's dive in and do some reflecting. Um, I'll ask you first.
hmm
If you were to sum up 2024, a theme or major lesson in a word or phrase, I'm gonna add phrase
Yeah, yeah,
just
sure.
to create a little more spaciousness. In one word or phrase, how would you sum up 2024?
Humility. And I
Mm,
said that last year, I realized as well. So humility, yeah. Would you like me to elaborate or a little bit?
please.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, the first things that come to mind, we're talking off air a little bit about my career movements in the last 12 months, in the last 18 months, really. And I've moved to being the primary carer in our relationship, so in our marriage. So we have two young girls, and my wife has returned to full-time work this year and resumed her career, which is something we talked about before we had kids, that we wanted to give each other the opportunity to tag team and pursue each other's careers at the right time. And so that's something I've been really happy to do. A part of me has been really happy to do that. Another part of me has dealt with an incredible loss of feeling valued and appreciated as a
Mm,
professional. And that's been one of the biggest challenges for me this year is trying to maintain some kind of career and identity as a professional 2.5 days a week, basically, while I've cared for my daughters for the remaining days of the week. And also not feeling a lot of momentum, and that's very difficult when you've only got 2-ish days a week, and many of those weeks have been filled up with staying at home with sick girls or disruptions. So this year it's thrown quite a few challenges at me, and I have to say, like humility, that makes maybe the way that I frame that now is it's a bit of a sob story, but it's actually when I have zoomed out and seen the kind of deeper gift in this year. Um, it's been a spiritual journey for me more than anything, Ali. So I can see that the challenges that we've experienced this year, the kind of loss of identity, the impact to the ego, of not feeling seen and valued in my work has been a great opportunity to go inward and also humble myself that I am like an amazing mountain, just like all of the other amazing mountains that are out there, right? You look around and I'm special just like everybody else is special, so I'm not really special. It's that kind of humility that really the stuff that matters, the revolution won't be televised. It really is like a quiet life and the work that I'm doing with my children at the moment and in my marriage and in myself is all quiet inner work that the world doesn't see. And that's good. That's fine. That's perfect.
And it's still really valuable, right?
Mm,
Just because it's not seen doesn't make it not valuable.
mhm,
And it's really hard in our culture sometimes to not get the like shiny thing that you can share and get praise or, you know,
mm,
kudos for.
yeah.
I've witnessed that in you, and I think it's really incredible to see how you've embraced that role in all of the complexity and the deep challenge and like provoking, I think it takes a lot of strength to stay with it. A lot
Mm,
of people might have turned back, but you did not. And
mm,
it sounds like you can connect to it too at this deeper level, which is really powerful.
mm. Well, yeah, to speak from my own experience, um, as a white man in a developed country, having grown up with a good education. Even so, like I grew up receiving a lot of praise going through
Mhm,
school. So report cards and teachers saying nice things about the things that I did. The behavior that I learnt to show to other people that was lovable. And then, of course, like going through university and getting a profession and continuing that sort of narrative that I've inherited that a man should provide and be successful in his career and strive and all of those things. And so to s- to have that sort of well to take that away and consciously like I'm doing that, but also the deep sort of like connections to those stories are very hard to sever. And so I say that like for a man to kind of like become the stay-at-home dad or primary carer still feels really, really, really hard. And
mhm,
I don't expect any sympathy because it's harder for women, right? So this is the other thing is when I think about how difficult it has been for my wife to get momentum in her career after staying home and being the primary carer for 2 and a bit years with our daughter Harriet. I have so much compassion for um, women who are generally like far less advantaged to resume a career or step away from a career than a man is in our society as well. So I just see how difficult it has been for me, and yeah, just have so much compassion for women, who have surrendered their career for a long period of time. Many, or altogether, some women have, you know, ignored or dulled down that light that is to contribute something, and how difficult that is to have that supported. So yeah, in that way, the spiritual lesson for me has been compassion with the
mhm.
greater experience, the greater human experience as well.
Yeah, it's really beautiful.
Okay, what about you, Ali? What's your one word or phrase for 2024?
I think for me, the word that comes up is reorientation, but I don't know that that is fully encapsulating. There was a lot of like learning how to see feelingly is a phrase this yoga teacher. I love yoga with Adriene. She has a really popular YouTube. One of the things she talks about is like inviting you to practice different balance things by like closing your eyes and see with your felt sense, like see by feeling, and kind of like use sight in a different way or a different kind of sight. And that feels like the see feelingly is kind of where I feel like I've been spending a lot of time, and I can expand on
Yeah,
that.
please. I'd like to see where that has emerged from what's been happening this year.
Yeah, I think I entered, last year I moved. I left New Mexico and was not really like the timing was not my choice. I
Mm.
was to leave my house because my landlord wanted her daughter to live there, but it was lining up with like a change I'd been wanting. And I didn't really know where I was going to land. I started out the year traveling, which was incredible.
In actual
And
Mexico.
yeah, I went to
That was a year
Mexico.
ago. Wow.
That was last January. I know. Um, I spent some time in Oaxaca and Mexico City, which was amazing. And also many things. Like it provided, as travel often does, lots of deep reflection, provoking experiences, challenge, resettling, reorienting. Um, and when I got back, I came back to Maryland, which is where I grew up outside of Baltimore and DC. And I was here for work, but then I was also reconnecting with friends and family and just feeling into being back here. I don't even think with the intention of this is where I want to move, but just I'd like to be with my people again because that's what I missed so much when I was in New Mexico was a lot of solitude.
Mm.
And I liked being back with community and people I'd known, and it felt nice. And I just decided I wanted to kind of take my time and take everything one step at a time and notice what was taking up my energy and thoughts. And I wanted to spend more time creating. I wanted to spend more time um, just exploring what was here actually that I may not have noticed before. And I guess some intuitive part of me knew that being back here, which is where I grew up and have spent a lot of time, but also where I felt I had to leave in order to become this like other version of myself. For me, I think coming back has been this invitation to embodying those parts of me here, like
Mm.
being that person here.
Mhm.
And
Like an
we're
integration of the new parts and the old parts together.
totally for sure. And noticing like what emerges. I started studying herbalism, found an herbalism teacher that I loved. I took a class on creativity, which was really incredible and just got me back in like the creative space of just making things and taking time for my creativity and writing and putting together some new workshops. And I've started slowly to do some of the work around somatic work, which is what I'd been wanting to do super slowly. I mean, like, I feel as though the change was so incremental. Um, it almost, I mean, in a way, I can kind of relate to you because it feels like things happened in these very like slow shift, but that slow shift really was happening.
Mm.
Um, I was spending a lot more time with my family and noticing like where I didn't get as triggered or where I could just like be myself a little bit more. Like the space is just this much, but it's there.
Mm.
And yeah, taking everything one step at a time. I guess integration would probably be a better word for this past year because that's, I think, maybe more of what I've been feeling,
Mm.
this weaving back.
Mm.
Yeah, and then also I think opening up to a lot of different, some new areas for me. Studying ancestry has been a huge piece of my year and connecting more with my mother's line, which is Jewish. So, like, connecting more with Judaism and the wisdom traditions and the complexity that comes with being a person with Jewish heritage in this moment and finding my politics inside of all of that and not wanting to lose the like beauty that could be there amongst this moment. Like it just, there's been a lot happening there. But I think one of the shining gems truly for me has been finding certain teachers who I really resonate with, that I really align with personally, politically, and who also speak to like some of just the really powerful wisdom, learnings, and insights that exist inside of Kabbalah and Judaism in general, that feels like this like ancient almost coming home for me, of recognizing what's here that I didn't even really know much about, but that exists, that my own ancestors like might have practiced.
Mm.
That is, I guess, also like an integration element too. So, and that's totally like under the surface type of work.
Mm.
Um, just this like, oh, I'm just noticing where a lot of my attention and energy has been going, and it's in different directions than maybe it used to in the past. But
That
it's
makes a
slow.
lot of sense.
Finding.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
the kind of integration or the reorientation that's a great word still, I think, because it seems like you are now finding your place in the
Hmm.
world based on who you are. Now, this might be too hard a question to answer, but it just was intuitively coming to me while you were sharing is, who are you now, Ali?
Mm. Wow. Um, I think, hmm, the way I would answer that is that I feel much more the imaginative, creative being that I think I've always been, and very much when I was young, that was like who I was someone who kind of lived in her imagination and was very creative. And um, I think I'm allowing that essence back more and more into my life, and who's very spiritual. Like I'm a very just spiritually oriented human. And I think being conditioned by the world, I felt like I've needed to separate from that because I wasn't raised with that. And there's a reclamation to come back to, and yeah, like trying to find what fits and what feels right, and what's not escapism but is actually like grounded and rooted in something real. That's been a long process, but I am a spiritual being. That's kind of how I know myself and the world, and I'm letting myself be that more and more. And through the ancestry, I've started to see myself in the line of humans. And I can kind of place more of like what I'm working through that is really unique to my lifetime, that is different from my parents, and that is different from my grandparents and my great grandparents, and on and on. And but that is so important for like where we are right now. And I guess it gives me like knowing that line of people helps me understand like what might be mine to do for like the link, for the next generation. And
Mm.
that this is really helpful to articulate, because that more than anything is part of the reorientation that's been so helpful. Because I no longer feel, when I'm centered, I don't feel like I have to do it all, but I do need to do the part that's mine,
Mm.
like I'm not going to heal everything.
Mm.
Um, but if I can do the work that is available to me to like become a more liberated, creative person who can exist following her own path
Mm.
as a woman, in the world, choosing for herself, traveling, getting to experience things, like that's cool. That is pretty awesome.
Mm.
And yeah, I think it helps me understand why certain patterns run through my system and all of that, which that's its own whole other conversation. But
Yeah, this is something I've recently reconnected with in my, like, I've told you about this sort of reflection and tension setting process that I went through a few years ago that I've done again this year for the first time. And one of the ideas is that sort of reignited for me was that a theory, let's call it, but that we are all born with a unique set of challenges to face in our life to increase our consciousness in a couple of particular areas. And it's the idea for me, at least, that I like is that I'm overcoming something that my previous generation, my parents weren't able to, and that's the progress that I'm making. And it helps with parenting as well because there's this
Yeah.
sort of saying that we're all going to screw our kids up. It's just in what way, and instead of calling it like screwing our kids up, we're going to hand down, a unique set of gifts, challenges to work through in their life that will increase, their awareness and enlightenment in some way. So for me, that's just helped me realize that, like, the reason why I keep facing similar challenges or problems is that whole thing about we attract the same problems until we learn the lessons. So at the moment, for me, that's very much about facing fear, dealing with stress, external stress, and developing like the coping mechanisms to transcend that. And
Hmm.
if I can even do that a little bit in my lifetime, that's probably a good outcome.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think that's a really beautiful perspective. And also, what a way to be in relationship with yourself too, where you can kind of honor what it is you're really doing and how profound it is to change a pattern,
Mm.
Like that is not superficial change. That is like deep, deep kind of from within us type of change. And to see any amount of shift is so powerful. And I think it also takes the pressure off of us to do it all in a certain period of time because it's not always possible to,
Mm.
you know, to see it or to have that change happen on a timeline that we dictate.
Yeah. Well, that's the other good thing about having a friend, accountability friend who you don't see every day. Just reflect back to you because when you're talking about your somatics progress and you're like, oh, it's going so slow, and I'm like, well, that seems like a pretty recent emerging thing. Like, feels like that's rapidly happened, in our friendship that you've been like really like focusing on somatics. I was almost going to say that would be your word for 2024. So the
Interesting.
progress, the progress
Cool.
of like what's the saying that we underestimate what we can do in the long term and overestimate what we can do in the short term. So
100%. Interestingly, I use this lunar planner that I love, and she has like intention setting at the beginning of it. And I found the one I did in 2023. So it was the goals I set for myself in 2023. And I was looking at them and realized, wow, I've actually now at the start of 2025, I have actually made some progress, like real progress on these things. But at the end of 2023, I guarantee you I wouldn't have thought that.
mm, mm,
It just needed a longer time horizon.
mm,
And I think that's a practice I'm going to be starting to save mine moving forward and just like give myself a little more time than
mm,
a year to be able to bring things into being or to build upon like what I was working on last year and really like keep building with it because it might just need more time to come into fruition.
yeah. And we can only sort of hit in the direction that we're aiming, right? Even if we don't exactly get the thing that we're aiming for, we're generally like going to head in that direction in some way, which is progress. I think
Yeah.
that's one thing that I've been missing in the last year or couple of years, realistically, is being intentional in setting like some form of goals or like intentions for myself in the year ahead. I can be kind to myself because it has been like a pretty relentless couple of years of just like rolling with the punches and showing up and being present to what emerges. But I'd like to seize a little bit more control and be in the driver's seat a little bit more. And I think, I do have the proof as well. I remember that a decade ago that like I would be looking back over the goals that I'd set and felt like a failure in in that year for not achieving all of them. But then 3 years later, I'm like, oh yeah, I did it. And it was almost like unconscious. I was basically like, the intention had been set and planted, that it just happened. I was pulled toward that after setting that intention.
Yeah, totally. I think that's pretty cool to notice that and recognize that.
Mm.
Are you ready for the next question
Yes.
on our
Let's go. Next question.
what may be ready to die away or for you to shed? And along with that,
Mm.
what has consistently caused you the most pain or suffering this year?
This is the shadow part of the conversation, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, the first thing that came to mind was sort of to this point about the loss of identity as a professional. So I've
Mm,
really grappled with feelings of, um, at times, of self-loathing. And I know that it's not who I am. These are like thoughts that I'm not good enough. I should be doing this. I'm not earning enough money. I'm not successful enough. All of that kind of stuff as well. And that's been exhausting. Like that's taken a huge toll. And that's definitely something that I'm ready to let go of, because hasn't served me at all. There's also things that I have been able to like work through. I think that's one of them, that I'm increasingly having a better relationship with that voice in my head that presents those thoughts that aren't true and are coming from the historical baggage that I've inherited. Um, Other things that have caused me pain this year have been, um, working through unresolved tensions in some of the relationships that I've had. And um, this has been a really good thing. I'll just touch on it, briefly, out of respect to the relationships that I'm in. Um, but I'm sure it's common with so many people that you have a relationship with your in-laws that can be complex at times, and it has been for me. And we've all, everybody, I think, has had a difficult couple of years through COVID. And for me, that sort of came to a head in the later part of this year, where um, I was aware that the relationship that I was having with my in-laws and for our family wasn't working. And it forced me to do some serious reflection. I think the cool thing about this process for me has been that, um, when I have felt judgment or anger or blame toward other people about the way that I've felt treated, it's been very disempowering. It's been very disempowering to be the victim, to be like, poor me, I've been treated this way. These people don't understand me. They've done this, this, and this. Um, and there's no agency there. So through, some reflection through my wife's support, I was able to kind of reach a point where I could look at my own behavior and
mm,
what was
mm,
within my control, and just ask, how am I contributing to this dynamic at the moment? And what's mine to own here? And what am I looking for from those in this relationship? What do I need? And maybe I can give them what I need first. And so for what that was worth, I was able to. It was really, really hard, and I didn't want to do it, and it felt gross, and it took a lot of time, because the first instinct to kind of say that I was wrong, or accept that I was partly wrong, or I did the wrong thing, or I wrong's not the right word, that I missed the mark, right? That my behavior could have caused hurt to somebody else. The instinct of the ego is, no, they're the ones that are wrong. Like, why should I do that? Why should I take any ownership? And so, of course, every relationship is a dynamic. It's relating. It's yin and yang. It's, it's 50-50, 49-51, whatever you want to say. And I realized, this is the humility part, that I realized that in a fight, flight or freeze state, when I have felt scared and unsafe, my behavior has been threatening and hurtful, because that's the best that I've been able to do at a time when I've felt scared and threatened. And so,
Mm,
um, in that relationship, they have seen me at my worst, and
mm,
my behavior, although justified in my mind because I'm scared and I'm feeling unsafe, has been hurtful. And
mm,
when I can see that and see it through the eyes of other people, and how that certain behavior, even if it doesn't seem like it's hurtful from my perspective, has been experienced that way, I've been able to firstly take responsibility for that, feel the kind of impact on the other person, and feel that with compassion, which has opened my heart, which has led to, greater connection and love with those people. And it's opened the door for healing. And so that's been the case in this relationship, as well as, mutually, that sort of, ownership and recognition of each other's behaviors, the kind of, compassion, and also, apology to take ownership for the impact on each other's behaviors. That has been a wonderful thing to sort of let go of. It's amazing, actually, with those sort of relationships. Not just, let's not like shift this from in-laws, but anyone that you have a kind of adversarial relationship, how much of that is lived in, the head, like in past and future storytelling, and so much of it is in the imagination, and so much of it is these like imagined conversations. And so that has caused me so much suffering and pain in the last few years. And to kind of put that out there in a loving way, I was very deliberate, and we all were, I think, in terms of like not intending to trigger the other person or deal with it sensitively, but to deal with the real person and the real issues, and to actually be in each other's presence has been very healing as well. So that's a really cool thing. I'm glad that we have shed some of that, and not to say that there won't be challenges. We're different people. There's the beauty and the challenge of difference, right? That like, who do you learn from? You don't learn from people who are the same as you. So, it's the beauty in learning from difference, but with that
mm.
comes challenge, because, it's we're put outside of our comfort zone, I guess, when we're challenged, aren't we?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and when it's a relationship that you can't leave, in a sense, it forces you to go to that level of growth, which is really powerful.
Mhm.
Just with it, to stay with that process of, it sounds like transformation, which is really beautiful.
Yeah,
Not all
I
relationships
actually, I've
are
got these, like, one of the things I do in this like goal setting and reflection process is, I have the 10 most painful experiences from my year that I capture before this process, and then I let go of the experience, but I take a lesson from it. And so that these sort of, end up
Mm,
being like, um, proverbs, or something like that. So one of the lessons I took from last year was, beyond ego and jealousy, I can discover deep connection and commonality. Um, there's always another one as well. Where is it? Something about, feeling compassion for. I've lost it. It was really good, actually. Um, Oh, perfect. Yes. See the hurtful behavior of others through the lens of their trauma, and set boundaries with love. That was the other lesson as well, that everybody's like hurtful behaviors are coming from a place of hurt or trauma. And if you can
Mhm.
see, if we can see that through the lens of other people's trauma, like trauma, call it what you like, you know, it might not be trauma, but if you can imagine that we're all wearing glasses in some way, that we see the behavior of other people through our own painful experiences of childhood, and then, you know that we all have those glasses, and see that behavior compassionately, and know that that's not the real, that's not the real person.
Mhm. Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's
Okay.
powerful.
That was a lot. What, over to you, Ali. What was what has caused you suffering this year, and what are you ready to let go of? What are you ready to?
Hmm. Um, I was so immersed in your story. Coming back to my experience, it was really sweet to hear that. I think we need the reminders of what's possible in relationship when you are willing to, go through that process that you went through and like see yourself and really see another person too. Um, so thank you for that
Hmm,
reminder.
thank you.
I think for me, I'm definitely battling with my similar voice that says I'm not enough, that says I need to get it right, that judges a lot of my choices and wants me to have been on a more traditional path.
Hmm,
Um, and I also think whether it's a voice or whether it's an instinct to like hide or keep things in secret, that's another big piece that I really struggle with, especially around my creativity. Like creativity has been such a source of soul food for me, and I want to share it more, but I have a lot of fear and vulnerability in sharing what I create. And I know where some of that comes from, of course. Early experiences, where I felt very criticized or like I couldn't quite be those things or put that out in the world. Um, and I'm also starting to explore like, wow, what are the ancestral patterns of like hiding who you are? That's in my family too. So like maybe there's all these layers that exist, and having that awareness, I think, provides the compassion for me of, okay, be gentle. I'm not trying to self-sabotage. That's not actually my intention. And there's a lot that needs support in order for me to be able to put things out in the world. Um, so that needs to happen. And I want to be able to do that. It feels worth it to be able to work through the things that come up that get in the way of me, like, creating and offering and being myself in the way that I have always like wanted to and felt compelled to
hmm,
be. So I think, yeah, I guess, is that shedding? Yeah, I think I'm also aware some of these things are really deep. They're gonna probably take a lifetime,
yeah,
to be
yeah.
quite honest. But
Hmm,
I want to be working with them. And I know the power that can happen when I slow down and take the space to like tend to that in me.
hmm.
Um, and interestingly, you know how people put out these like word mashups around the new year, and the invitation is to look for the first three words you see in there.
Yeah, I love those things.
Yeah, me too. And the one I did, I saw the first word I saw was shadow, which I was like,
That's crazy. I was just gonna say this is shadow work. This stuff,
oh,
we talked about this before, but like being in relationship with your fears, even if, like you say, it's not gonna, it might be with you for your lifetime. It's pretty in sync with what we were talking about before, is like we have a unique set of fears to face in our life. So instead of like putting them in the dark, bring them into the light, have a relationship. Like what Yoda says, named must your fear be before banish it you can, naming your
Well,
fear, articulating it, having a relationship with it. And then there's never anything more complex with a non-life-threatening fear than to have courage, right? That's the only antidote to fear that doesn't kill you is courage. Courage is
mm-hmm.
that not the absence of fear, it's feeling fear and acting in spite of it.
Yeah, totally. Or with it, right? Like you can be afraid and do something. That's also okay. I think that is something I'm really settling into more and more. Yeah, I mean, yes. And it feels like shadow work is really important also into what you were just describing of like, how am I showing up and creating some of the things that maybe I struggle with the most? Like, can I recognize my part in things and the place I can change
Mm.
to, or just gently work with myself, like finding this duality of like not making myself wrong ever and knowing I might want something else to be experienced and I could have agency and choice in what that is.
Mm.
The other two words I saw after I saw shadow were abundance and magic. And I was like, how fitting is that? Like, unless we learn to be with shadow, I don't know that I can experience the abundant, magical life that I want to have. Like, I think the way to do that is to like see more of myself, like widen the lens, welcome it, be with more of it. So
I
yeah,
like
that's fair.
I can really relate to the fear of expressing yourself creatively because this is, in the void of like professional work, I've had the fountain of musical creativity has flowed, and yeah, the challenge I've faced in the last year is resourcing that in terms of like the time and the money to fulfill the kind of visions I've had musically. And then also like in this goal set, Living the Dream is the program that I have developed that I told you about a few years ago. So in this process, toward the end of week 7, you go through like a guided process to set goals, and one of the exercises is facing your fears that you may encounter on the way to pursuing your goals. And so there's a handful of fears that I had to articulate, and then you set them up on the ground with a rope or a towel or something as a barrier that you have to cross over those fears and pass through them. It's a very visceral experience, but very powerful. And for me, I had a fear about a fear that no one cares. No one cares. Like I tap into my creative source. It's pure, it's beautiful, it's like authentic. I make beautiful art. I put it out in the world. I'm proud of it. No one cares.
That's
Like
very relatable.
so,
I feel
so then the kind of fear with that is like, why put myself out in the world if no one's going to care? And
Mhm.
um, yeah, that's just a fear to face, right? It's like to pass through that fear.
Yeah, totally, for sure. Wow. Well, I mean, you're alluding to something that might come up, I think, in this question, but the next question is what has changed over the course of the year for you?
Mhm. Tangible changes, definitely an increase in writing, recording, playing music. So Mr. Rascal came back to life 18 months ago, and I've put 2 songs out, The Mystery and The Magic, which came out in April this year. And that was really well received. And I went through a whole journey of like facing fears just to put that out there. I've recorded a third song that's going to be on an album if and when I can resource it. I've also just completed an EP called Clean Break, which is basically finalizing and resolving 4 unfinished works, project songs that I started a decade ago. That I've now like added bass and drums and vocals and produced properly, and so that's another thing that I'm kind of facing a fear of putting out into the world because I want it to be heard, I want it to be cared about, and I want to do that and put it out in a way that at least the people who matter or who want to hear it or need to hear it will hear it. But probably the highlight, despite all that, musically, has been I've formed a band with my childhood friends. Well, one of my childhood friends, I should say, because um, yes, my former bandmates from my 20s and a close friend now. We had a band together with my late mate Matt, who played drums. And since his passing, we started jamming again, and we formed this new band called The Lost Resort. And it's been a joyous experience where we've all got kids, and so we've rehearsing very rarely, but we played a 3-song set, our first gig in like 20 years or something, this last year. And we've been rehearsing again, and we've got like a dozen really cool new songs. We're writing new songs, these old dads, finding our creativity and collaborating together. So I feel very excited about that change. The other kind of like cosmetic, or not, I shouldn't say cosmetic changes are, we went on a 3-month caravan trip around Queensland this year. So we packed up our whole life. We rented out our house while we were away. We had a wonderful experience. It was challenging. It was amazing. It was all the things at once. And it served to kind of give us critical distance from our life here, where we live in Tugun on the Gold Coast, living in a townhouse, and in a very, what would you sort of say, like a very uh, aggressively growing area that is very money driven in some ways at the moment. So having some distance from that gave us some perspective. We came back and we felt very clearly that we were ready to leave where we were living, which we never thought we could do because we were so close to the beach. So we sold out that townhouse that we were living in. Now we're renting in this gorgeous 1950s beach shack that my dear friend and colleague Philip has rented to us. And we're looking to buy a family home in the next 12 months for the next chapter of our lives. So that's been a big change as well. And that's about all I'm aware of. I know there's more. There's more that's changed, but that'll do. What about you, Allie?
Yeah, it's a lot of change. I would say for me, yeah, there's also another answer to the last question coming up for me.
Oh yeah, go for it.
Well, one of the things, so I've been in a lot of transition. I've been spending time back on, in Maryland and outside of DC, but I haven't like fully landed. I'm house sitting, staying with family, just kind of still in this very murky place because I'm really trying to trust myself and this process of finding what really does feel right in the next step for me. And throughout that, I think in addition to the creative inner critic, there's also this critic being like, well, just like figure it out and make a decision and do the thing.
Mm.
Um, and like, chop, chop, why haven't you figured this out already? And slowly I have been learning to be with that voice, I think, more and more, and to not let it guide the show. I mean, there are definite moments and times where it's kind of guiding the show, but I have learned to recognize it. And I think that's both one thing I'm ready to let go of is the part of me that is just comparing myself to every other person and not seeing the value of my own path, which is very unique and is different for a reason. But it's hard to see when you're like, in comparison mode.
Yeah.
And and I think that's changing. Like I can also sense that that is changing in me. Um, and that I just have the sense I'm in this deeper process that is taking its own time. And I have certain aspirations around home that I think I'm trying to figure out. There's a part of me that wants some like communal, interdependent, but autonomous living. I'm trying to figure out what that looks like because I haven't quite found that existing in the world.
I
But
just had this
the
really funny vision, Ali. I'm sorry, this isn't very sensitive, but I feel this patience that we both have of like what's emerging, and maybe it's never become clear. And then I just saw you in like your 70s or 80s in like a retirement village where it's like communal living and you're facilitating and you're like, I found it. I found it. Like you can own you own this, but we all participate.
Totally. I was watching something with my parents the other day about like art classes at a retirement community, and I was like, you know what? I think I would love like living in a retirement village if I was with all my friends. Like that
Yeah.
would be
Yeah.
amazing.
I'm kind of joking, but it brings up a funny point or an interesting point just about like when you take the ego out of these things and something that we're talking about off air about when we moved into this rental because we had intentions, we had a whole bunch of disruptions in December that thwarted our plans to buy a home. And so we're quote stuck renting for the next year, you know. My wife lost her job, a bunch of other things. Um, and now here we are in the suburbs. We were looking for acreage, we were looking for land that we can have a rainforest and grow things and build a shed and all of this and just have more space. And here we are in a suburban street with a little backyard and a little front yard. And it's like, no, we never wanted to live in the suburbs. And the more we've been here, it's been like 5 weeks or something. We're like, really love this. The neighbors are lovely. The street's quiet. We have a bit of communal life. We close the doors. We can look out on the street. Our kids can play in the yard, in the backyard. The maintenance is easy, but we can still grow things. So it's just like when you take away the kind of ego and sometimes the things that you're looking for, they might not look exactly how you imagined. Um,
Totally. And that there is like, if you kind of trust that something's happening, even when it's not quite what you want,
yeah.
maybe there is something there. I mean, I think I'm coming to that more and more. Sometimes it's clear, sometimes it's not. In a way, I'm kind of my sea feelingly has also led me towards Baltimore, which has been a place that I've just been spending more time and meeting really interesting people and enjoying that. I would have probably never, when I was leaving New Mexico, been like, I want to move to Baltimore. That just wouldn't have been what came to me, but I'm just like noticing what's happening, where
Mm,
I feel drawn and what's happening when I'm there and like who I'm meeting and what's emerging and just being like, okay, okay, interesting. This is like something seems like it's happening here and I want to trust that on the home front.
mm,
And it's hard. It's just it is definitely challenging. Um but I can also see like these big cycles that have been completing in a way coming back here. I've been like kind of letting go of the time I attempted this in DC with friends to do this like interdependent living that like really did not work out
mm,
and did not work out in such a way that it like kind of upended so much of my life and sent me on this whole path of like searching for things, but having to find them in ways I wouldn't have necessarily chosen.
yeah.
Um, and coming back again feels like that, like reclaiming the seed of the dream that I had there. Because for a long time, I was like, no, I don't ever want to try that again. That was really painful and hard. And
Mm,
now I think I'm coming back to it with a lot of different insight and perspective and what I've learned the last bit of time. And I'm kind of seeing like, yeah, no, actually, there was something really beautiful in the seed of that dream. Can
mm,
I go back to those seeds and what is still there? Is there still something there for me?
mm.
Um,
I love that. I love
and
this cyclical and at this sort of age and stage in our life as well, where a decade maybe has passed between certain endeavors that we've attempted, and some of those just get left behind, but the ones that sort of come to us again, you know, and reappear, that's interesting. That's it's worth the things that are
yes,
persisting. There's something about that to pay attention to. So yeah, that I mean, the
totally.
fact that you're still house sitting and you find value and that's congruent with who you are as well, I think that's
Mm,
that's interesting to me. It's been a common theme in the whole time that I've known you is exploring notions of home and a
mm,
kind of fluidity in what that is, but the consistency of the elements that make you feel at home as well. So definitely
totally.
a something that continues to grow in you, maybe for the year
Yes.
and alluding to the next.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I guess I would say I think that's become clearer and clearer and clearer for me is like what are the touchstones that allow me to ground even if there's a lot of movement and
Mm,
it just feels more integrated and more like it's actually a useful support for me to know those things and to have them at my disposal.
mm, that's great.
Yeah. What what happens when we embrace that path? Okay, so what has been growing in you or in your life for the year, over the year?
Yes. Well, that probably to the music point again, that's been growing, definitely growing, growing, growing. My friendships with the smaller group of people that are important in my life have been growing. So these like guys in my band, The Lost Resort, they are childhood childhood friends, and they're part of my church and my faith as well. And so that's been just something that feels so rock solid and consistent that I value. And a handful of other friends who are in the same like state, age and stage, or sharing a similar journey. Those friendships have just become tighter, and I've made a real effort as well, I guess, to the extent that I'm capable of like telling them and showing them that I appreciate them and valuing those friendships. I think for me, in terms of like my faith and my spirituality in the last 12 months, this has been one of the most wonderful things, that the kind of humility and the challenges that I've gone through in the last year is that it's forced me to really like draw on the things that I really feel to be true and connect to outside of myself. And so prayer and surrender and trust and those sorts of things, and just finding a bigger meaning in terms of like the challenges serving me in building my resilience. I feel incredibly grateful that is something in terms of like feeling at peace in my faith and my spirituality. I've never felt better in my life than I do right now, and that's a wonderful feeling. That feels really good. So I can see how adversity serves in that regard. You know, when things are
Mm,
going great, we don't really. I don't. Most people don't tend to think of anything other than themselves. You know, to think outside of themselves. So that's been great. What about you? What's been growing for you
Hmm.
in 2024?
You know, I think in a weird way, well, at least what I'm noticing at this point in time, heading into what I would imagine many people, especially in the United States, are arguably a little overwhelmed about what is going to be in this year. And I mean, yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Um, and I feel this like growing sense of faith and optimism. I just
Hmm.
feel I feel very at odds with what's happening at a geopolitical level because like in my maybe like spiritual self, I feel so hopeful about what could be possible and about what I know brings me joy. And I think that's another piece too of like really wanting to orient towards joy and delight and like connection and just the goodness of life. I think when things get really intense, it also really highlights the beauty where beauty does exist and the things that are just like magical and create awe and wonder no matter what.
I think I told you
Um,
about this when Grant was sick, that my nephew came up with this term called collateral beauty.
oh, wow. I love that.
Right, because
Yeah.
I remember walking to the hospital, you know, when he was having surgery, and just everything was on a knife's edge, literally. And just like hearing the birds tweeting and the sun like
Mm-hmm.
piercing through the autumn leaves.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just like, that's so beautiful. And
Yes.
it's my capacity to see beauty was heightened because of my capacity to see sadness and despair. You know, it's just like this.
Yes. Yeah, totally. You saying that reminded me when my dad and sister had their surgery, they had a
That's huge,
transplant.
yeah.
Um, I was wandering around the hospital, like similar. I felt everything felt so intense that even just the like slightest bit of levity or poking through of something else was like, oh my God, that is just the most miraculous thing ever. I wandered into the like children's section of the hospital and there was some interactive display that would follow when you made movement. It like mimicked the movements you
Oh,
made and these like sparkle star formation, and it was so beautiful, and it made you just like stop and play with this thing and move and dance. And for whatever reason I started like crying because it was just what I needed. I needed something that felt like the the magic of just existing and moving was something worth celebrating. So I totally understand that
that's great.
feeling. And I think my sister got married the weekend after the
That's
election.
right. And you were the celebrant.
I was the officiant, yes. And that was another example of like, oh, this thing happened in this country, which is devastating. And
Mm.
setting
Yeah.
us on a course that we are yet to know what is going to happen, but there's still joy. And they're in New Orleans, they had a second line band, and it was just the most joyful. Like we're parading and dancing with my um now brother-in-law Carlos and his family, and just like no one can take that away from us. Like whoever is in power, we still get to like dance together, have music, come together to celebrate love. Like this is always
Mm.
our right to get to, hold on to. And I think those things are really what's coming with me into this year of just feeling like doubled down on like, I know what matters and I know what's important to me. And I'm gonna make sure those things are in my life more and more. And I actually feel even more committed to just like serving the things that I know need to exist in the world. So,
That's
yeah.
wonderful. That's a really, really inspiring message, Allie, in the context. I wasn't expecting that, but yeah, it's beautiful. It's genuine. I had something else to add to what's been growing for me in this year,
Mhm.
because this has sort of emerged in the latter part of the year, of this feeling of being out of control, of being, I guess, like uh, impacted by external things constantly. So there's been this feeling of having greater setting greater intention in my life, and living more intentionally and more consciously. And that's with an element of self-compassion, because it has been very difficult to just get by and roll with the punches. But starting this year, at least, with greater intention. The other thing that's been growing in me is I'm sort of like questioning this a little bit now, because the thing we've talked about, of the sort of loss of identity from stepping back from a career, and I would really like to explore a new career path in the next 12 months. That's something that I'm really open to doing. So exploring new opportunities. And I'm also just like wary of what you've sort of brought to my attention about like filling a void, as opposed to accepting the invitation to learn from,
Mhm.
learn at a deeper level who I am when I'm not valued by other people. But that's
Hmm.
also something else. But
Hmm.
I do feel called, at least, and I think 12 months, when I look back at the start of last year, and I was in a similar position where I'm like, if my company work doesn't pick up, I'm really open to exploring a new career path. Well, that has essentially been the case. I don't feel driven to hustle and to market my current line of work and do more of the same. So it's either, evolving my company and doing something, elements of it significantly differently, or it's
Mhm.
wholeheartedly exploring a new career path as well.
Mhm.
And so that's been growing for me, is the opportunity to step into a new path.
That sounds really interesting.
Hmm.
Yeah. It's just, if that's emerging naturally, I feel like that's totally something curious to
Yeah.
listen to.
Yeah. So what about you? One word to sum up your intention for 2025? Could you put it into a word?
I have a word that I've been playing with. The word is exude. And
Oh, that's nice.
yeah, I think it to me is about like letting things out, like kind
Hmm.
of exuding who I am and
Hmm.
what I care to release and touch the world with, but not with like force. I think of like the sun's rays, they stretch out and naturally touch the plants and the earth's surface and human beings. But just because that's natural and that's what happens. And so I want to play with what that could look like for me of like not like forcing things, but really just naturally opening up and letting things out and becoming a little more visible. The last, I like
Hmm.
truly like 7 or 8 years of my life feel
Yeah.
like they were very inward. And I think it's time to be orienting outward again.
Mhm.
Um, and becoming a little more visible with the things that I've kept protected.
That's
So
really interesting because I'm like visibility has been a big part of like my intention setting over this like Christmas period as well. And I've
hmm,
I've been reflecting on the career changes that I've made in the past, like when I left architecture as well, and what it was that put me onto a new path. And it was essentially putting myself out there in a new environment, embracing an opportunity, and then being visible in that environment so that people could see my gifts and talents and then present opportunities to me that I then said yes to, and then so on and so on. So that was the ripple effect. It was and this is I think something I haven't gotten right in the last 12 months is there does have to be a dance with the world. You can't, it's not all an inside job. You got to put yourself out there. You got to be uncomfortable and you've got to be in an environment where you can be seen for your gifts and your talents in the world. And so that visibility, yeah, that's important. And I actually like it's one of the other lessons from my process last week. Feeling valued and creating value for others is about doing the right work for me with the right people. So
mhm.
that's something that I've learned is that it's like work, finding work that is right for me, that's aligned, that's part of that common thread that you and I've talked about. And that is with the right people. And I guess that's an experiment, right? You got to find, well, that work wasn't right. The people were right, but the work wasn't right. The work was right, but the people weren't right. The work is right and the people are right.
Totally. Yeah. So your word is around visibility
My
and
word
then
is opportunity, I'm going to say for 2025.
mm,
Opportunity. I'm pursuing and stepping into new opportunities. I'm really open to that. So if anybody is listening to this video and knows me or knows anything about me, I have 3 days a week that I can do anything other than caring for children, and I'm open to new opportunities. So let me just
that
put
out.
that out to the universe.
Love it. That's awesome. Nice. Beautiful.
All right.
Well,
Exude and opportunity. Let's see where we are in a year from now, Ellie.
totally. We'll be curious to see.
Yeah. Thank you for your optimism and your positivity. And my intention is to make our calls more frequent this year as well.
Mm,
It's been some major curveballs, and I was in a caravan for 3 months as well. So I've missed the frequency of previous years, and I'd like to pick that up a bit. And yes, just before I know it's a month away, but happy friend anniversary for February as
right.
well.
Yeah,
It's
totally.
all the odds we've made it 10
I
years.
know. We were just, yeah, cool doing the virtual friendship before everyone else
Yeah, before it
noticed it.
became cool.
Well, many blessings and visibility and magic and opportunity and working with shadow and all the things that are here to come. It will be really intriguing to see where we're at um, in a year from now.
Happy New Year. Much
Happy
love.
New Year.
Talk soon. Thanks for listening, anyone who listened.
Yeah, thank you for being with us.